Welcome back, dear dreamer. The winds of Supta still hold their breath. The moon bells remain shy in their bloom, but the first sparks of hope shimmer softly in the air. Zarvi stands ready, her heart steady as she works to weave courage and dreams into the tapestry of her hometown. We continue our journey tonight as the townsfolk prepare for the Lantern Wind Festival. The first dream song is close, its melody waiting to rise, its winds eager to stir. Let the warm crackle of fire take you onto the glowing paths of Kalpanon. So close your eyes, dear dreamer. The winds are waiting and the journey is about to begin. Days folded gently into each other, like the turning of quiet pages. Zarvi continued her morning rituals, tending to her garden, gathering herbs, and listening for whispers from the land. She spoke to the flowers, though they still refused to bloom, and spun her threads, testing the air for the dream winds that did not come. The threads snagged more often than not, but she persisted, letting the rhythm of the land settle into her bones. If the winds had truly gone still, she needed to understand how to coax them back. Each day, Zarvi visited the Dream Pedlar's market, moving among the stalls, watching, listening, and feeling the weight beneath every smile. The lanterns were still being hung for the festival, the streets filling with chatter, but beneath it all lay a quiet heaviness, a hum too faint to hear unless you were listening closely. The town wasn't broken, but it had forgotten how to sing. She stopped by Burjan's bakehouse more than once, not just to buy bread, but to sit with her old friend, hoping to understand what had slipped from the heart of Supta. Days passed, and then one morning, while Zarvi sat in the garden with a cup of dream honey tea, the thought came to her, gentle as a breeze stirring the edge of a curtain. The people of the town, every last one of them, bought bread from Burjan, the same bread they had eaten for years, but without the courage it once carried. Zarvi set her cup down slowly, her heart quickening. What if courage was the thread that needed to be pulled first? She felt the certainty settle deep inside her. The first step was not in lanterns or maps, but bread. Bread had always been Burjan's way of sharing strength, even when people didn't know they needed it. And if the dream essence was to be revived, it had to begin with courage. Without hesitation, Zarvi rose from her seat, brushed the dew from her hands, and hurried into the cottage. Her dream vials, the tools of her craft, awaited her. It was time to weave courage back into Supta, one loaf at a time. The small table in her cottage was soon covered in jars and powders. Moon dust, lavender pollen, fragments of old dreams she had collected from distant places. Zarvi moved quickly but carefully, her hands steady as she sorted through the tiny vials, each one glowing faintly with the residue of a dream. She needed the right one, the fragment of a dream that belonged to Burjan. After a moment, her fingers found it, an old dream, wrapped in a glass vial, faintly shimmering like the last light of a fading star. This was a dream Burjan had spun long ago, back when his bread carried more warmth. It was a dream of courage, a quiet, steady kind of strength, the kind that kept people going even when the wind stopped blowing. She placed the vial carefully beside a bowl of powdered herbs and began her work. Mixing a potion was both art and instinct, a craft born from memory, intention, and patience. She added drops of stardust and a pinch of dream essence, stirring slowly until the mixture glimmered with a soft golden light. The scent that rose from the bowl was delicate, a blend of freshly turned earth, citrus blossoms, and the faintest trace of hope. Zarvi whispered over the potion, weaving her intent into every swirl. This was not just a concoction. It was a memory returned, a reminder that courage had never truly left Burzan. It had only been waiting to be stirred awake. It took a few days for the potion to settle, and when it was ready, Zarvi carefully poured it into a small glass bottle. The next morning, she tucked the bottle into her satchel and made her way back to Burzan's bakehouse. The bell above the door gave its familiar chime as she entered, and Burzan greeted her with a flory grin. Zarvi smiled back, pulling the small bottle from her satchel, and continued, "I brought you something today, something that might help you." Burzan raised a curious brow, wiping his hands on his apron as he took the bottle from her. The glass glimmered faintly in the morning light. "It's a potion," Zarvi explained. "A fragment of one of your dreams, courage, spun back into form. Try adding it to your dough. See what happens." Burzan turned the bottle in his hands, the glimmering liquid catching the light. He didn't hesitate. There was no fear in his eyes, only quiet determination. Over the next few days, Burzan worked tirelessly. He poured small drops of the potion into his dough, kneading it with care, folding his hopes into every turn of the bread. The smell of his bakery began to shift, subtly at first, like the scent of rain carried on the wind before a storm. Each loaf carried a little more than the last, and though the change was small, it felt like the spark of something stirring deep beneath the surface. One morning, as Zarvi entered the bakehouse, the air greeted her differently, warmer, richer, as though the bread had begun to hum again, faint but steady. Burzan met her at the counter, holding out a freshly baked loaf. "This one's almost there," he said, a note of quiet pride in his voice. The loaf glowed faintly with a warmth that could not be explained, its crust golden, the surface etched with swirling patterns like the flight of birds on the wind. Zarvi cradled the loaf in her hands, inhaling deeply. The scent was unlike anything she had smelled in years, a blend of toasted grain and wildflowers, of the hearth fire and morning mist, with a trace of courage woven beneath it all. It was almost perfect, the kind of bread that felt like holding someone's hand in the dark. Burzan gave a small, satisfied nod. "It's coming back," he said softly. "The courage isn't gone, Zarvi. It's still here. It just needed a little nudge." That night, beneath a sky filled with stars as bright as lanterns, Burzan worked late into the evening, baking loaf after loaf, his heart steady with purpose. The fire in the oven glowed brighter, as if feeding on the intention woven into each batch. The bakery filled with the scent of courage, not overwhelming, but soft and comforting, like the first light after a long night. By the time the moon reached its highest point, Burzan pulled the last loaf from the oven and held it up to the light. This one was nearly perfect, 80% courage, as Zarvi had described it. But to Burzan it felt like everything. The loaf glimmered faintly in the soft glow of the hearth, and the scent carried through the open windows, curling into the night like a promise. Burzan tucked the loaf into a basket and made his way to Zarvi's cottage, the stars shimmering above him. When Zarvi opened the door, she knew, without a word, that they had reached the first step. "It's ready," Burzan said, holding out the basket with a small smile. "Or almost ready, but it's enough to start." They sat together on the porch. Zarvi took the loaf, cradling it carefully, and met his gaze. At that moment, beneath the starlit sky, they both knew they were ready to bring courage back to the town. The winds had not yet stirred, but something had shifted, a note rising slowly from the silence. Zarvi nodded. Tomorrow we share it with everyone. The scent of the nearly perfect bread drifted into the night, carrying with it the first hint of hope, a song waiting to be sung again. When Burjan saw the bread beginning to work, something inside him shifted, a quiet, steady kind of belief taking root. He knew then that if the dream wines were to stir again, it would require more than his loaves. Everyone's hearts would need to align, their hopes stitched together, their intentions shared like notes in a song. But the first step had to be his. Courage was not something easily rekindled, but it had to start somewhere. He rummaged through the old wooden chest beneath his counter and pulled out the lavender wrapping paper, the same kind he had used when the bakery brimmed with life. The paper shimmered faintly under the light, as if the dreams folded into it had not quite faded. He wrapped each loaf carefully, the way one wrapped a small but meaningful gift, tying the packages with thin ribbons of cloud thread he'd kept from better days. These weren't just loaves, they were offerings, fragments of courage to be shared, whether the townsfolk knew it or not. Burjan decided not to tell anyone what was woven into the bread. The courage needed to awaken on its own without being sought after. It had to bloom in small moments. A flicker of hope in someone's chest, a little more warmth in the hands that worked the loom, the spark of curiosity in a heart that thought it had forgotten how to dream. Over the next few days, the lavender-wrapped loaves began to appear at doorsteps and stalls, tucked into baskets, given with a smile to anyone who wandered by the bakery. A gift, Burjan would say with a smile. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to change. The first signs were so small that they could have been missed. A baker hummed a tune while kneading dough. A weaver found her fingers moving more easily over the threads, the patterns forming with an old, forgotten rhythm. A child laughed a little louder, chasing a dream mote across the square with a spark in his eyes. At first, the townsfolk didn't realize what was happening. The changes were subtle, tiny sparks woven into ordinary moments. Some thought it was just the crispness of autumn in the air. Others chalked it up to the excitement of the upcoming Lantern Wind Festival. But the energy was contagious, moving quietly through the streets like an unseen current. Meanwhile, Zarvi began her quiet work. Each day she wandered through the market, speaking with the townsfolk and collecting fragments of their wishes and dreams. Some days, people offered small hopes freely. A wish for rain, a desire for an old love to return, a dream of better days. But there were many mornings when the townsfolk hesitated, unwilling to give even a small piece of themselves. Why offer wishes to the wind if it doesn't blow? They would ask, with the kind of resignation that settles into weary bones. Zarvi accepted these moments with patience. She knew that the heart, like a flower, only opens when it's ready. And still, she collected what she could, a whispered dream here, a quiet wish there, bottling them carefully into vials of mist and stardust. Some days the bottles were nearly empty, but even the smallest fragment held a spark. On the fifth morning, Jirim, the flower whisperer, noticed something strange. As she tended to the quiet blooms, her hand brushed over a moonbell, and she saw it. The first bud. It wasn't a bloom, not yet, but the tiny green tip had pushed its way through the folded petals, a soft promise waiting for the right moment. Jirim held her breath, gently cradling the stem between her fingers. It was the first sign, small, but undeniable. Later that day, she mentioned it quietly to a few other folks in the market. "It's starting," they whispered to each other, though no one said what it was. There was no need. The winds might not yet be blowing, but something was stirring and everyone could feel it. Though many of the townsfolk felt the change, not all hearts opened easily. Marin the dreamsmith and Vezra the cloud weaver stood at the edge of the growing hope, watching with quiet curiosity. Marin tried again and again to shape his totem, but they slipped from his hands before they could hold form. "It's as if they don't want to be made," he muttered, frustration lining his voice. Vezra, too, struggled. The clouds she tried to weave dissolved into mist, escaping her grasp before the thread could take shape. And though she watched the others with quiet joy, her own hands faltered, heavy with the weight of old grief. The two of them shared glances across the market, not bitter but weary, as if they had tried and failed too many times to believe easily. They weren't untouched by the shifting energy. They felt it, tasted it in the bread, saw it in the smiles returning to their neighbors. But grief leaves deep roots, and neither Vezra nor Marin could yet find the courage to join in fully. Day by day, the bread worked its quiet magic. Courage wove into the fingers of the weavers, into the hands of the map makers, into the threads of lanterns filled with dreamlight. Crafts once forgotten began to flicker back to life. It wasn't perfect. Some days brought only small sparks, and some efforts still faltered. But hope had started to breathe again, light as the first stir of wind on a still night. Bourgeon's bakery became a kind of quiet beacon. He baked tirelessly, weaving courage into every loaf, shaping it carefully depending on who it was for. A soft bread filled with warmth for Jirim, a bold rye for the star map maker Darlo, and a delicate honeyed loaf for Mali, the lantern maker. Each loaf was tailored and crafted with intent, a different kind of courage for every heart that needed it. Zarvi continued her work in the background, mixing her vials of dream dust and mist, carefully bottling the fragments she collected from the town. The wishes, though small, began to grow, like tiny seeds taking root in the soil. And each night, as the stars glimmered, she knew she was getting closer to something she couldn't quite name, but could feel stirring beneath the surface. As the day of the Lantern Wind Festival drew nearer, the town buzzed with quiet excitement. The banners were hung, the lanterns polished, and the market square filled with the sounds of preparation. It wasn't the wild, joyous celebration it once had been, but there was a new energy in the air, subtle but steady. The people moved with a little more ease, their hands lighter, their smiles less guarded. That night, on the eve of the festival, Bourgeon brought Zarvi one more loaf. This one was nearly perfect. The courage was woven so seamlessly into the dough that it glowed softly under the moonlight. Zarvi held the loaf in her hands, inhaling deeply. It smelled of fields after rain, of morning dew, of hearth fires, and soft laughter shared at the end of a long day. It smelled like courage, not bold or loud, but the kind that whispers quietly into the heart. You can try again. We're ready, Bourgeon said softly, standing beside her on the porch. His voice carried no doubt, only quiet certainty. Tomorrow we share it with everyone. Zarvi nodded, her heart light but steady. The winds hadn't yet turned, but she could feel them waiting. And beneath the starlit sky, with the scent of courage drifting into the night, Zarvi knew that the song was beginning to rise. Not all at once, but note by note, spark by spark. The first dream had not been lost. It had only been waiting for the right moment to be remembered. The evening of the Lantern Wind Festival dawned soft and golden, the air buzzing quietly with the thrill of preparation. The town of Supta stirred early, bathed in the honeyed light of late autumn, as villagers bustled about, hanging ribbons, polishing lanterns, and setting tables under the open sky. There was joy woven into the atmosphere, subtle, like the scent of jasmine on a passing breeze. But it was joy nonetheless, delicate and full of promise. Garlands of ivy and dream lanterns swayed gently from door frames and treetops, casting little glimmers of light even in the daylight. Children ran through the streets, clutching bundles of paper lanterns shaped like stars and moons, their laughter twining through the crisp air like ribbons on the wind. The sound of musicians tuning their instruments drifted from the market square, notes slipping through the streets like petals carried downstream. As the day unfolded, the market square transformed into a world of wonders, each stall brimmed with life. The crafts of the stellar folk, once dull and mechanical, now shimmered with intent and essence, as if each creation carried a whisper of the dream winds beginning to stir. At the corner stall, Tarlo the star map maker spread out his charts, which now gleamed with trails of constellations that shifted and glimmered in response to the dreams of the onlooker. The paths he drew weren't just routes to distant places. They were pathways through dreams, routes through uncharted hopes, secret ways that only the heart could follow. When Zarvi passed by, she saw a young boy trace his finger over a star line, and for a moment his eyes glowed with wonder, as if he glimpsed a world he hadn't dared to imagine. Further along the square, Melee's lanterns burned brightly, filled not with oil but with fragments of dreams. The lanterns flickered in hues that changed with the emotions of those nearby, deep blues for yearning, golden yellows for joy, pale greens for peace. Each lantern was a tiny dream in itself, glowing softly in the palms of those who carried them. At another stall, Manya, the dream-catcher woman, hung new weavings that shimmered in the breeze. The webs sang quietly, the threads humming with captured fragments of wishes and memories. Children marveled at how the threads shifted in color and sound, changing as the dream winds began to move, ever so subtly. Even the flower whisperers' bouquets stirred with new life, petals opening just enough to release faint, fragrant promises into the air. A single moonbell, still budding but glimmering with promise, rested gently among the bouquets. Maris, the flower whisperer, touched the bud with reverence, knowing the bloom would open when the winds fully returned. As night fell and the festival reached its height, the time came for each of the stellar folk to share their craft. One by one they presented their works, maps that guided hearts, lanterns that carried joy, dream catchers that held fleeting moments safe from being lost. Each craft shimmered with a bit more essence than before, their creators emboldened by the subtle turning of the winds. But Marin the dreamsmith and Vezra the cloud weaver still struggled. Marin tried again to shape a totem from metal and dream essence, but the form slipped through his fingers like smoke, refusing to hold. Beside him, Vezra grasped at passing clouds, trying to weave them into threads, but the clouds scattered before she could bind them. They stood at the edge of the celebration, hope stirring within them, but not yet strong enough to reach their hands. Zarvi watched them with quiet understanding. Grief runs deep, she knew, and some wounds cannot be rushed. She gathered the stellar folk and the townspeople, holding in her hands the collective potion she had made from their dreams, griefs, and wishes. The vial shimmered like morning dew, caught on spider silk, delicate but strong. "This is for all of us," Zarvi said softly, her voice steady but gentle. The dream winds do not rise from one heart alone. They rise when many voices sing together. She opened the vial and poured the essence into the air, where it drifted like mist, wrapping gently around everyone present. And then, Zarvi began to hum, the first notes of the first dream song, the one she had learned from her grandparents. In the stillness before the first breath was drawn, when the sky held no name and the night felt long, a whisper rose soft from the heart of the air, a song of becoming, a dream born from care. The melody was soft at first, as if carried by a distant breeze, but it grew as others joined in, a song woven from hope and loss, joy and sorrow, courage and fear. The townsfolk sang with her, some with strong voices, others barely whispering, but every voice mattered. Together they raised the first dream song. Oh, rise with the winds, let your heart take flight. Through sorrow and shadow, through morning and night, we carry the stars, we carry the flame. Each dream is a spark, and hope is its name. As the song filled the air, Vezra reached once more for the clouds. This time they lingered just long enough for her to weave them into thread. Her fingers trembled, but she wove on, stitch by stitch, and as the song reached its crescendo, a delicate tapestry took shape, woven from mist and cloud, holding dreams spun from collective hope. Though storms may scatter the dreams that we sow, and the winds grow still where no lanterns glow, the song lives within us, waiting to rise, like the moonlight that sleeps in unopened skies. When the tapestry was complete, the winds stirred for the first time in years, rushing gently through the streets and lifting lanterns into the sky. The moon bell on Jerim's stall bloomed fully at last, petals unfolding to greet the night. Marin, standing quietly beside the fire pit, knew what he had to do. He gathered fragments of dream essence from every stall, every craft, every heart present. One by one, the stellar folk and townspeople came to him, offering small pieces of their dreams. Even Zarvi placed a vial of stardust into his hands, her smile gentle and certain. Marin worked with quiet determination, his grief softening as he folded every fragment into the glowing coals of his forge. The totem began to take shape, a delicate moon bell, cast from dreams, sorrow, courage, and hope. And this time, the totem held. So gather your dreams, and let them take wing, for hope is the song that we all must sing. The keeper of hope is not gone, but near, alive in each heart, in each wish we hold dear. When the totem was complete, Marin held it up to the wind, and the air around them shimmered with joy. The dream winds swept through the town, lifting the lanterns high into the night sky, carrying the song with them, and spreading it far beyond Kalpanon. In that moment, everyone knew the keeper of hope had never been a person. It was their collective essence, their dreams intertwined, their courage shared. The totem was simply a physical reminder, proof that the first dream still lived within them. The night ended with fireworks blooming in the sky, like dreams exploding into light. The streets of Supta echoed with laughter, music, and soft conversations, and the scent of Burjan's bread lingered on the wind, warm and familiar. In the early morning, as the first light of dawn kissed the rooftops, the town lay still, its people fast asleep beneath the warmth of new dreams. And in Zarvi's garden, beneath the soft hum of the brook, the moonbell flowers bloomed fully, their petals glowing faintly in the pale morning light. The wind stirred gently, brushing through the flowers as if greeting an old friend. Zarvi slept soundly, her heart quiet and full, knowing that the winds would keep blowing, carrying dreams wherever they were needed. Close your eyes now, dear dreamer, and let the winds carry you to far-off places, where dreams bloom beneath starlit skies and courage hums softly in the air. The first dream lives within you, waiting to rise with the morning light. Rest now, and know that every dream is a thread in the great tapestry of the world. Sleep softly, with the wind at your back, and may your dreams be gentle, like lanterns floating on a quiet night. Good night, dreamer, until the winds call you again.